Hi, I'm Patrick Phillips. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what we do in our lab. Unfortunately, I'm nowhere close to my lab right now, so I'm going to make do with what I've got around here in terms of surroundings and try and describe what we're up to. One of the big questions that we're interested in the lab is the evolution of genetic architecture. That's how all complex sets of genes work together through genetic networks to build the overall organism, and then also how selection operating at the level of the whole organism translates down and trickles down through those genetic networks to lead to evolutionary change at the molecular level. Of course, not all genetic architectures are going to be exactly the same. Some might not even be considered to be very attractive, but we're still interested in understanding how they're structured and how that structure influences the evolutionary process, as well as whether or not the structure itself is adaptive or subject to particular evolutionary constraints. One of the central organizing themes in the lab is that of the network, both network among organisms, but especially among genes and different kinds of biological processes and how they structure the way that organisms function, but then also how the evolutionary process, both through natural selection and other neutral processes, structure the way that organisms are put together and the way that genes interact with each other. One of the main approaches our lab uses is microfluidics. Because the worms are small and easy to flow through liquid, it's easy to put them into channels and manipulate them, flow them around. And by building somewhat complex devices, we can precisely measure the phenotypic attributes of the worms, as well as do things like sort them according to their sex or gene expression, things like that. Another one of the important approaches that we use in the lab is experimental evolution, in which we can control the pattern and cycle of selection and then observe what the responses are in the different populations. In particular, because of the nature of the worms, we can freeze them, and so that we can analyze the ancestors and any intermediate populations genetically and genomically and phenotypically at any point that we want. So it's a very powerful technique for us. One of the central concepts in evolutionary biology is that of fitness. Frequently we imagine that that's a hill climbing operation in which organisms undergo mutations and then become more and more adapted to their environment, slowly increasing in fitness. Of course, another metaphor for all this climbing is stress, which is another thing that the lab really studies to the best of its ability. Even when one ascends the heights, you still have to put up with the constant buffeting of input, of environmental variation, mutations, and do the best that you can. Another set of questions that we're really interested in is in the evolution of mating system and sexual interactions between males and females. So in this case, people come from all over the world, put locks on this bridge. Slowly there's tons of locks on the bridge. The railings give way. The railings fall into the Seine onto potentially unwitting boats, crushing them to death. And really there's no better metaphor for love than that. We also studied the evolution of sperm and seminal fluid, but I'm not sure I want to go for a deep metaphor on that, so let's just leave that in the general realm of male-male competition or male-minotaur competition, as the case may be. Another one of our emphasis areas in the lab is understanding the biology of aging, both in terms of understanding the genetics of aging, as well as the evolutionary consequences of aging, but also screening for drugs and other compounds that might extend life, but in particular extend the health span of individuals. What makes some individuals stay healthier for a long period of time? Is it their individual genetics, something that they've done, or just random effects of the environment? Overall, we take a highly integrative approach that connects genetics with evolutionary processes in order to understand how complex organisms evolve and how the underlying genetic networks and other physiological systems work together to build biological diversity.